There were only $47 left in their tiny New York apartment. A single mother, her 18-year-old daughter, and her 9-year-old son. If they couldn't pay the rent within 7 days, they would lose everything. But that wasn't the worst part. The very next day, something happened that changed their lives forever. The girl everyone mocked for being poor made a promise to herself. One day, my mother will never cry over money again. Nobody believed her. Nobody thought she could change anything. But years later, the same people who laughed at her were standing in line just to shake her hand. How did a poor girl with only $47 turn her family's life around and become incredibly successful? Stay until the end, because this emotional journey will leave you inspired, shocked, and unable to forget her story. My name is Emma Carter, and I grew up in one of the poorest neighborhoods in the Bronx, New York. If you're listening to my story today, I want you to know something. Everything I'm about to tell you really happened to me. 7 years ago, my family had only $47 left. That wasn't our weekly budget. That wasn't our grocery money. It was everything we had in the world. Our tiny apartment was old and falling apart. Water leaked from the ceiling whenever it rained, the heater barely worked during winter, and the walls were covered with cracks. But it was still home. I lived there with my mother, Lisa Carter, and my 9-year-old little brother, Noah. My father had abandoned us when Noah was only a baby. He disappeared without saying goodbye and never came back. Since then, my mother worked harder than anyone I'd ever known. Every morning before sunrise, she left for a small cafe where she worked as a waitress. When that shift ended, she went straight to another job cleaning hotel rooms until late at night. She worked nearly 16 hours every day. Still, it was never enough. Bills kept coming. Rent kept increasing. Food became more expensive every month. One cold Friday evening, I came home from school and found my mother sitting silently at our kitchen table. There were unpaid bills everywhere. She was counting a few wrinkled dollar bills with trembling hands. I looked at the table. $47. That was all we had. My mother tried to smile, but tears slowly rolled down her face. "I'm sorry, Emma," she whispered. "I don't know how we're going to survive this month." At that moment, my little brother Noah walked into the kitchen holding his broken toy truck. He looked at Mom and asked with an innocent smile, "Mom, are we still buying my birthday cake next week?" The room became completely silent. My mother couldn't answer. She simply hugged him tightly while trying to hide her tears. Watching that moment broke something inside me. That night, I made myself a promise. No matter how hard life became, I would never let my mother cry because of money again. I had no idea how, but I knew one thing. This was the beginning of a journey that would change our lives forever. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. My mother was already getting ready for work. Dark circles surrounded her eyes, and even though she looked exhausted, she forced a smile before leaving the apartment. Watching her struggle every single day broke my heart. That morning, I made a decision. "Mom," I said quietly, "I'm going to find a job after school." She immediately shook her head. "No, Emma. Your job is to study. I don't want you spending your life working endless hours like I do." I didn't argue. But deep inside, my mind was already made up. After school, instead of going home, I walked through the busy streets of New York looking for work. I entered one store after another. Every answer was the same. "Sorry, we're not hiring." The second store rejected me. The third store rejected me too. As the sun began to set, my feet hurt, my stomach was empty, and I was ready to give up. Then something caught my attention. A small neighborhood coffee shop had a handwritten sign on the window. "Part-time helper needed." I took a deep breath and walked inside. The owner, an elderly man named Mr. Wilson, looked at me with a kind smile. "Do you have any work experience?" he asked. I honestly replied, "No, sir, but I'll work harder than anyone you've ever hired. I just need one chance." He stared at me for a few moments. Finally, he smiled. "Be here tomorrow at 7 in the morning. I'll give you a 1-week trial." For a second, I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. I thanked him over and over before running all the way home. The moment I opened the apartment door, my little brother Noah rushed toward me. "Emma, did you get the job?" I nodded with tears in my eyes. "Yes, I did. My mother hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, she whispered. But promise me one thing, never stop chasing your dreams. That night, for the first time in weeks, our tiny apartment felt filled with hope. None of us knew that this little coffee shop would become the place where everything in our lives would begin to change. The next morning, Emma woke up at 5:30 a.m. For the first time in many weeks, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. She quietly got ready for her first day at the coffee shop. Before leaving, she looked at her mother and little brother sleeping on the old couch. She whispered, I promise, one day I'll give you both the life you deserve. At exactly 7 a.m., Emma arrived at the coffee shop. Mr. Wilson was already there, preparing everything for the morning customers. He handed her an apron and said, Remember, Emma, a job is not just about making money. It's about learning, improving, and becoming better every day. Emma listened carefully. During her first few hours, she worked harder than anyone expected. She cleaned tables, prepared orders, greeted customers, and learned everything quickly. Most workers took weeks to understand the system, but Emma learned it in just a few days. Mr. Wilson noticed something special about her. She wasn't just working for a paycheck. She was studying every little detail. She noticed which drinks customers liked the most, what time the shop became busiest, and how the business was managed. One afternoon, Mr. Wilson saw Emma writing notes in an old notebook. He asked, What are you writing? Emma looked embarrassed. I just want to understand how businesses work. Maybe someday I can build something of my own. Mr. Wilson smiled. Most people your age only think about spending money. You're thinking about creating something. But life wasn't becoming easy yet. At home, the bills were still waiting. The rent deadline was getting closer. One evening, their landlord came to the apartment door. He knocked loudly. Lisa, you promised me the rent. I can't keep waiting. Emma watched her mother's face become pale. Her mother lowered her head and said, I just need a little more time. The landlord sighed. You have 3 days. After that, I have no choice. When the door closed, the apartment became silent. Noah looked scared. Mom, are we going to lose our home? Emma sat beside him and held his hand. No, Noah. I promise we won't. But inside, Emma was worried too. She only had a small part-time job. How could she save her family in just 3 days? The answer came from an unexpected place. The next morning, Mr. Wilson called Emma into his office. He placed a newspaper on the table. On the front page was a story about a young entrepreneur competition in New York. The winner would receive a life-changing investment. Mr. Wilson pointed at the article and said, Emma, I think you should enter this competition. Emma looked surprised. Me? But I'm just a poor girl who works at a coffee shop. Mr. Wilson smiled. Never underestimate yourself. Sometimes the person with the biggest dreams comes from the hardest life. Emma picked up the newspaper. For the first time, she saw a real chance to change everything. But winning the competition would not be easy. Hundreds of talented people from across New York were going to compete. And Emma had only 3 days to prepare. The moment Emma entered the young entrepreneur competition, she knew she was facing something much bigger than herself. The competition was being held in a huge building in Manhattan, surrounded by some of the brightest young minds in New York. As Emma walked inside, she looked around. Everyone seemed confident. Some contestants wore expensive suits. Some arrived with business mentors and expensive laptops. Emma looked down at her simple clothes and old notebook. For a moment, she felt like she didn't belong. A girl standing nearby looked at Emma and whispered to her friend, Is she here for the competition? She looks like she came to clean the building. They both laughed. Emma heard them. But this time, she didn't feel embarrassed. She remembered her mother's tired face. She remembered Noah asking if they would ever have a bigger home. She remembered the $47 sitting on their kitchen table. And she told herself, I'm not here to impress them. I'm here to change my family's life. The competition began. The first challenge was to present a business idea that could solve a real problem. One by one, contestants presented their ideas. Many talked about expensive technology and luxury products. Then it was Emma's turn. She walked onto the stage with only her old notebook. The judges looked curious. One judge asked, "Emma, where is your presentation? Where are your charts and expensive equipment?" Emma took a deep breath and answered, "I don't have those things, but I have something more important. I have experience." The room became quiet. Emma began telling her story. She talked about her mother working 2 jobs. She talked about families who struggled every month. She explained her idea, an affordable online platform that would connect small local workers with people who needed their services. A platform where ordinary people could find opportunities without needing expensive education or connections. The judges listened carefully. For the first time, nobody was looking at Emma's old clothes. They were listening to her vision. When she finished, there was silence for a few seconds. Then one of the judges asked, "Emma, what makes you believe you can build something like this?" Emma looked directly at him. "Because I know what it feels like when someone has talent but no opportunity. I want to create chances for people who are ignored." The judges exchanged looks. After the presentation, Emma returned home. She didn't know if she would win, but she knew she had given everything. That night, while her mother was sleeping, Emma sat at the kitchen table working on her idea. The rent deadline was only 1 day away. Her family was still close to losing their home. Then, early the next morning, Emma received a phone call. Her hands started shaking when she saw the number. It was from the competition organizers. She answered. A voice on the other side said, "Emma Carter, congratulations. The judges have selected you as one of the finalists." Emma couldn't believe it, but the next words shocked her even more. "However, the final round will be against the most successful young entrepreneur in New York." Emma's smile disappeared. The hardest challenge was still waiting. Emma couldn't sleep that night. She sat beside the small window of their old apartment, looking at the bright lights of New York City. Millions of people were living their dreams in that city. But for Emma, everything depended on one competition. If she won, she could get the investment money and finally save her family from losing their home. If she lost, they would still have only $47 and nowhere to go. The next morning, Emma returned to the competition venue for the final round. When she entered the room, she saw her opponent. His name was Jason Miller. He was only 20 years old but already famous in the business world. He wore an expensive suit, had a team of experts helping him, and had already received millions of dollars in investments. Jason looked at Emma and smiled. "You really think you can compete with me?" Emma stayed quiet. Jason continued, "You have no money, no connections, and no experience. This isn't a place for people like you." Those words hurt. But Emma remembered something her mother always said. People can judge your situation, but they can never decide your future. The final challenge began. Both contestants had to present their business plans to a group of investors. Jason went first. His presentation was impressive. He showed professional videos, detailed charts, and a large team behind his idea. Everyone in the room was impressed. Then it was Emma's turn. She walked onto the stage with her old notebook. No fancy equipment. No big team. Just her dream. She started speaking. "I know what it feels like to have a dream but no opportunity." She talked about her mother. She talked about her brother. She talked about millions of people who work hard every day but never get a chance. "My goal is not just to build a company. My goal is to build a bridge for people who are invisible." The room became completely silent. One investor asked, "Emma, your idea is powerful. But how will you succeed against companies with millions of dollars?" Emma answered, "Because I am not building this from a distance. I am building it from experience." The judges looked at each other. After hours of discussion, the final decision was announced. Everyone waited. Emma held her breath. The main judge opened the envelope. The winner of this year's Young Entrepreneur Challenge is... A long silence filled the room. Emma Carter. For a moment, Emma couldn't move. She had won. The investors promised to fund her idea with a large investment. Tears filled her eyes. Not because of the money, because she knew what this meant. Her mother wouldn't have to cry over unpaid bills anymore. Her little brother wouldn't have to worry about losing their home. That evening, Emma ran home. She opened the door and shouted, "Mom, we did it." Her mother looked confused. What happened? Emma hugged her tightly and cried. "We're going to be okay." But Emma didn't know something important yet. The money from the competition was only the beginning. Her biggest journey was about to start. After winning the competition, Emma's life changed overnight. The girl who once counted every dollar was now receiving calls from investors, business owners, and people who wanted to work with her. But even with all the attention, Emma never forgot where she came from. The first thing she did after receiving the investment money was not buying expensive clothes or a luxury car. She went straight to her mother's workplace. When Lisa saw Emma walking in, she was surprised. "Emma? What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be at school?" Emma smiled and held her mother's hand. "Mom, you don't have to work here anymore." Her mother looked confused. "What do you mean?" Emma took a deep breath. "We don't have to struggle every day just to pay bills. I finally did what I promised." For a few seconds, Lisa couldn't say anything. Then tears started falling from her eyes. "Emma, I never wanted you to carry this burden." Emma hugged her. "You carried the whole family for years. Now it's my turn." That evening, Emma and her family moved out of their old apartment. But before leaving, Emma stood in the empty room and looked around. She remembered the cold nights, the unpaid bills, the days when they had almost nothing. She whispered, "Thank you for teaching me how strong I can be." A few months later, Emma's company started growing. Her platform helped thousands of people find jobs and opportunities. People who once struggled like her mother were finally getting chances to improve their lives. But success also brought new challenges. Some people who ignored Emma before suddenly wanted to become her friends. Old classmates who once laughed at her started sending messages. "Emma, we always knew you would succeed." But Emma remembered those difficult days. She understood that success changes how people see you. One day, a reporter asked Emma during an interview, "What was the biggest secret behind your success?" Many people expected her to talk about money or business strategies. But Emma gave a different answer. "My success started the day I stopped feeling ashamed of my struggle." The reporter asked, "What do you mean?" Emma smiled. "Being poor was never my weakness. It was the reason I learned to fight harder." Years passed. Emma became one of the youngest successful entrepreneurs in America. But the most important thing was not the money. It was seeing her mother finally living without stress. It was watching her little brother grow up with opportunities she never had. However, Emma's journey was not finished, because she had one final promise left to keep. A promise she made on the night when her family had only $47 left. Years had passed since the night when Emma, her mother, and her little brother had only $47 left. The small, broken apartment in the Bronx was now just a memory. Emma was no longer the girl who walked through New York streets searching for a job. She was now the founder of a successful company that helped thousands of struggling families find opportunities. But despite all the success, Emma still carried one thing in her heart: a promise. The promise she made to her mother. One evening, Emma asked her mother and Noah to get dressed because she had a surprise for them. Her mother smiled and asked, "Emma, where are we going?" Emma simply replied, "You'll see." They drove through the city until they reached a beautiful neighborhood outside New York. The car stopped in front of a large house with a beautiful garden and a peaceful view. Lisa looked confused. "Emma, whose house is this?" Emma took her mother's hand and smiled. "Mom, this is our new home." Her mother froze. "What?" Emma handed her the keys. "I promised you that one day you would never have to worry about rent again." Lisa covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. She remembered all those years of struggle. The nights when she skipped meals so her children could eat. The days when she worked while being exhausted. She looked at Emma and whispered, "I can't believe you did this." Emma hugged her tightly. "We did this, Mom. You gave me the strength to keep going." Noah ran through the house excitedly. I have my own room. Everyone laughed. For the first time in many years, their happiness wasn't mixed with fear. But Emma didn't stop there. She started a foundation to help single mothers and children who were facing the same struggles her family once faced. She visited poor neighborhoods, shared her story, and told people, "Your current situation does not decide your future." One day, Emma returned to her old neighborhood in the Bronx. She walked past the old apartment building where everything had started. The building looked exactly the same. The cracked walls, the broken stairs, the memories. She stood there quietly for a moment. A young girl nearby was sitting alone, looking sad because she couldn't afford a new school bag. Emma walked toward her and asked, "What's your name?" The girl answered, "Sophia." Emma smiled. "I was once just like you." The girl looked surprised. "You?" Emma nodded. "I had nothing. But I had a dream." That day, Emma helped the girl and her family, because she knew exactly what it felt like to need someone. Years ago, she was the person hoping for a miracle. Now, she had become someone else's miracle. But there was still one final chapter left in Emma's story. The chapter that would reveal the biggest lesson she learned from poverty and success. Emma had everything people dreamed of. A successful company. A beautiful home. Financial freedom. Recognition from people around the world. But she knew something important. Money could change a person's lifestyle, but it could never replace love, family, and the lessons learned during difficult times. Years after her success, Emma was invited to speak at a major event in New York. Thousands of young people were sitting in front of her. Many of them wanted to become successful. Many of them wanted to escape their struggles. Emma walked onto the stage and looked at the crowd. For a moment, she remembered the old Emma. The girl who sat in a small apartment with only $47. The girl who cried silently because she didn't want her mother to see her pain. The girl who promised she would change her family's future. Emma smiled and began speaking. 7 years ago, my family had almost nothing. We were one step away from losing our home. The room became silent. I remember looking at my mother and seeing how tired she was. She worked every day, but she never gave up. She paused. At that moment, I learned something. Your beginning does not decide your ending. Everyone listened carefully. Emma continued. People will judge you because of where you are today. They may laugh at your dreams. They may tell you that you can't succeed. But remember this. Their opinion is not your destiny. After the speech, many people came to thank Emma. One young man said, "Your story gave me hope. I was ready to give up." Emma smiled. Never give up on yourself. The hardest days often build the strongest people. That evening, Emma returned home. Her mother was sitting in the garden, enjoying a peaceful evening. Emma sat beside her. "Mom, do you remember when we had only $47 left?" Lisa smiled. "How could I forget?" They both laughed. Emma looked at the house around them. "Back then, I thought success meant having money. But now I know the truth." Her mother asked, "What is the truth?" Emma answered, "Success means being able to protect the people you love and becoming the person you always wanted to be." Years later, Emma's story became an inspiration for millions. People remembered her not because she became rich. They remembered her because she never forgot the struggle that created her. The girl who once had nothing became the woman who gave hope to others. And it all started with one small promise. I will never let my family suffer again. The end.